Hi, my name is Janis, and I'm one of the diagnostic radiology residents here at the University of Washington. In the next 5 minutes, I'm going to go over 5 tips I wish I had known earlier in my personal finance journey as a resident and 5 things to avoid. Tip number 1, learn to live within your means. Honestly, this can be really difficult. We definitely hear this across multiple finance blogs, but it's definitely worth repeating here. Living within your means, super important as a resident. I personally have friends that pursue different career paths, and it really makes it hard when I see them buying houses, driving nice cars, going on fancy vacations. So I think it's really important to avoid that lifestyle creep as you can. I try to surround myself with like-minded people who make saving and kind of paying down debt their priority. I think it's nice that as residents, we're a pretty tight-knit group, so you're surrounded by people who are in a similar situation. So honestly, try to live like a med student during your residency. Try to live like a resident during your first few years as an attending. Really have an aggressive pay down debt strategy, and try to get yourself on that right financial footing right from the get-go. Tip number 2 is to make it easy for yourself. So the way that I do this at the end of every month is I have a certain percentage of my paycheck that goes into my different accounts. Percentage that goes into my retirement savings, percentage that goes into my brokerage account, another percentage that goes into my checking account. Basically, I've done this so that way at the end of every month, I only have a certain amount that comes into my checking account, and that's the amount that I know I can spend on, rent, groceries, car payments, things like that. Step number 3 is to make sure you're taking advantage of tax-advantaged accounts. So accounts that I'm talking about are your health savings account, your 401k, your Roth IRA. These are all tax-advantaged accounts, some of which are tax-deferred, or post-tax contributions that you make, for example, into your Roth IRA. So these are really important to make. They can lower your taxable income for your 401k, and a lot of places like your hospital that you're working for, they might offer a 401k match like my hospital does. Super important because if you don't take advantage of that, you're leaving free money on the table, and no one wants to do that, especially as a resident. So make sure you're taking advantage of all these different accounts if you can. Tip number 4, make sure you have a debt payment strategy. So for me, I'm planning on trying to take advantage of public service loan forgiveness, which basically you have to make 120 continuous monthly payments for an eligible employer. A lot of times if you're working in the healthcare industry, your employer is eligible. So the best way to make sure if you're up to date on those payments, to make sure that you submit a public service loan forgiveness application every year, and have your employer certify that you've been employed for this time, and that way the government can keep track of your payments. Good things to know because of the COVID pandemic. Even if you haven't been making payments on your student loans, they've been in forbearance. That time period from March when it started till basically the end of this year counts towards your public service loan forgiveness, even if you haven't been making payments. So good things to know. Other strategies for paying down student loan debt, you can apply for a consolidated loan with a private lender. Basically, that'll reduce some of your interest rates if your plan is to not go the public service loan forgiveness route. Tip number 5, disability insurance. Buy it. This is your wake-up call. If you don't have disability insurance, buy it now. As a resident, it's super important. Oftentimes we think that our biggest asset is going to be our house or our car, but really your biggest asset as a doctor is your ability to work. And if you can't work, you want to make sure that you are taken care of, your family is taken care of. So the best way to do that now is to buy disability insurance. As a resident, you're young, you're healthy, the underwriting process is going to be easy. So you don't want to pass that up. Make sure you have a future purchase increase option rider on top of your disability insurance. So that way, oftentimes you can't buy the amount of insurance that you need now to cover yourself when you're attending. But when you have that rider, you can buy more without undergoing the entire underwriting health evaluation process again. So really important things to have to keep in mind when you're looking for disability insurance. And next, we're going to move on to the pitfalls. So things I wish I had known as a resident. Avoid whole life insurance. So this is something that I hear over and over again. I think it's worth repeating here again too. Do not buy this insurance. It's basically, I don't want to say the word scam, but it basically is a really, really bad idea. bundles a life insurance policy with an investment option. Those two are never good ideas together. Oftentimes you'll end up paying really, really high premiums for the amount of it, for the insurance that you get. In addition, the investment option is not great. The amount of returns that you get on that, you'll make much more if you invested that money by itself into the stock market. Pitfall number 2 is to wait on saving on retirement. As a resident, it's really easy to trick yourself into thinking that, we really aren't making that much money, so it can be really hard to save at the same time as we're trying to keep up with our expenses of daily living, paying off our student loans, but really you can't afford to not save. Time is money, and time is a lot of money when you compound that. So if you get started early, even if you're saving a little bit at the end of every month, it's much better than if you started saving way later and started saving more. Compound interest is your friend in this case when you're saving. But in the opposite way as well, compound interest can be your enemy when it comes to credit card debt. Things like that carry a high interest rate, you want to make sure that you are not falling into that trap of carrying balances forward on your credit cards. That can be a surefire way into further debt, further problems down the road. So, if you can get out of that, if you can consolidate into a loan with a lower interest rate, or get an interest-free loan from your parents or your family, those are much, much better options than continuing to carry forward credit card debt. Pitfall number 3 is paying for high-fee investments. If you follow the words of wisdom from John Bogle, Warren Buffett, they all recommend investing in low-index mutual funds. Oftentimes, if you're picking stocks, you might be picking the wrong stocks. And it's all a game of speculation at that point. The stock market has always gone up. The S&P 500 has always gone up, despite blips from recessions or depressions. The stock market always tends to return to a higher level than it was before. The best way to play the stock market is to invest in a low index mutual fund. Pitfall number 4 is paying somebody to do the work for you. As medical students, as residents, as attendings, oftentimes we think that financial matters are over our head, and honestly that we don't have time to think about these things. As students, you're always promised as a doctor that you'll probably won't have to worry about money again in your life, which is not really true, unfortunately. If you're paying for someone else to do the work for you, that's money that's going elsewhere and not back into your own pocket. Again, the power of compound interest. Basically, money that's going to them is not money that's going into your investment. That's money that's not being compounded on. So you'll definitely want to save your money there. Blogs like Mr. Money Mustache, White Coat Investor, NerdWallet have made it really easy and simple for people like you and me to learn about personal finance in digestible ways that aren't too overwhelming. And it's never too late to start. Basically, this leads me to my last pitfall, which is basically not getting started on your personal finance journey now. I think this is your wake-up call. This is your incentive to get going. I think it's really important to talk about money enough to each other. And so I think this is really important to kind of get yourself on the right financial footing. Money has always been a taboo subject when talking to each other, but I think residents need to take charge of their own finances earlier on in their careers. And really, this is the best investment that you can make in yourself, aside from the medical education, aside from all the choices that you've already made. I think this will make your medical career that much more fulfilling and enjoyable, knowing that you have financial wellness and stability in your back pocket.